Hello, and welcome to Macedon Technologies December webinar, Understanding Digital Transformation. My name is Stacey Wright, and I'm the Director of Delivery and Education here at Macedon Technologies. I'm going to be your host today. I'm glad to see so many of you joining us, trickling in here. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function or the chat, just chat to panelists, and I'll be sure and cover all those questions at the end. Before we dive into our topic, I just want to take a moment to talk about Macedon, who we are, and why our experience gives us expertise in digital transformation. So we specialize in delivering intelligent automation solutions, a core part of digital transformation. And with over 100 clients and over 450 successful engagements, we've worked with organizations at every level of digital transformation maturity, and have helped guide our clients down that path in their journey. We're the world leader in advanced certifications in Appian, a low-code business process management or BPM platform, and are a trusted partner and reseller of Appian. Many of our practitioners also hold the highest level certification in UiPath, a robotic process automation or RPA tool. We're a UiPath Gold partner and reseller. So we're not coming to this topic from sort of a theoretical perspective, like what you see with a lot of other webinars and articles where they're talking about the theory of digital transformation. Instead, my panelists today have been in those boardrooms with the C-suite talking about their vision, but then also turning around, getting into the weeds and helping make that vision into reality. We're actual practitioners. So I'm really excited to have with me today, Andy, Harry, and Lakshmi. Andy, why don't you say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, Andy Raman, VP Professional Services here at Macedon. Like Stacey said, I have been embedded in these digital transformation programs across a variety of clients, across a variety of industries for the past 10 years.
That's great. Harry?
Hi, I'm Harry Stavridis, one of Macedon's Directors of Professional Services, and I head our federal and partner practices.
Awesome. Lakshmi?
Hi, all. I'm Lakshmi Mayappan, also a Director of Professional Services, except I work on our commercial accounts. And I'll say, getting to work commercial and seeing so many clients, I think I might have worked in every industry out there by now.
Yeah, very likely. So let's start with a pretty simple, basic question, guys. What is digital transformation? I mean, originally, back when it started, it was used to describe how an established business remains competitive in a field filled with startups and who are able to generate new technology fairly quickly. But is that still what it means these days? Harry, why don't you take this one?
Sure. I think there's a big focus on what we're now calling intelligent automation. To me, that's making organizational processes smarter by effectively marrying technologies like AI, ML, RPA, other emerging technologies. And all these technologies combined, they've got the potential to dramatically automate a lot of what people do right now. That frees those people up to move higher up in the value chain. I think it's interesting comparing commercial to government. I've actually been working in both sectors. There's a traditional difference around end goals, right? So commercial entities have traditionally been driven by stakeholder and shareholder value, and the purpose of government has traditionally been to serve citizens of this country, whether through regulation or providing for national defense or protecting our freedoms. And fortunately, we're seeing a convergence of these two goals. Companies are increasingly adding goals related to the greater good to their mission statements, and governments are starting to engage in, or actually continuing, I should say, to engage in public-private partnerships.
Yeah, for me, it definitely has evolved. I think it's helpful to understand the roots of the term, but I'm personally settling in on a broader scope. When I define digital transformation, what I usually like to say is you're using digital techniques to reach broader audiences and drive business models that couldn't exist before. And that can obviously apply regardless of whether an organization is big, whether it's small. It could be in the private sector, it could be in the public sector, and it could be an established business, or it could be a startup. So yes, established companies do continue to face pressure from startups, and they use digital transformation techniques to keep up. But they're also using digital to get more out of their leading market position. So banks using Zelle in the face of hundreds of fintech payment startups, they aren't keeping up, they're getting more out of their existing platform. Another example, insurers that are using big data, AI, and machine learning for decision automation, they're not fending off startups, they're creating more value for their existing customers and their shareholders by doing something at scale that startups just can't compete with. Another angle, there really isn't such a thing as a utility startup, but we're seeing utilities and other massive, heavily regulated organizations take these digital techniques and serving their customers better with them. So from a software or a systems perspective, this might mean using low code, automation, and enterprise data approaches to create a 360 view of a customer. You've probably heard that before. Then when you centralize all the touch points the organization has around that shared holistic understanding of the customer, I'd call that digital transformation. And customers and shareholders of these natural monopolies that aren't really at risk of losing market share to a startup, they're still benefiting from those approaches. So when I talk about digital transformation now, I like to put it in context. It always involves using digital tools and techniques, but what are you transforming and why? It could be an established organization that's trying to keep up, but it might be an established organization that's doing something new and needs to transform their business in order to do that. It could be a startup. Maybe they're doing something new that is transforming an industry that they're entering. I think that what Uber did, for example, for transportation should count as digital transformation. And what Amazon did for bookstores, that's obviously digital transformation. And then also computing, cloud computing. Those are examples of digital transformation, but not a established organization fending off startups. They're transforming an industry instead.
Wow, great point. Great point. So next question. Where have you, like what industries have you seen clients that are going through digital transformation? Lakshmi, you said that you had worked with a lot of different industries out there. Why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, it's a great question because it really is across industries, right? Across big and small companies, public, private sectors. Harry talked about intelligent automation. Every organization runs some critical business functions on email, access databases, spreadsheets, pieces of paper. They're looking for cost-effective ways to digitize and automate that. And so, you could have loan underwriting, you could have audit, you could have quality control, and those all get centralized into a custom tailored solution that can change quickly as the business does or as regulations do. There's also a lot of consolidation in industrials and manufacturing right now. They're using digital techniques to simplify and streamline integrating those new business units. There's can go on with examples, but there's the really successful transformations have not just moved spreadsheets to software, but have automated steps and made the work more intuitive and efficient to free up people's time for more valuable work.
Yeah, and I guess from the government perspective, right? Sometimes the government's seen as being behind the times. It actually has a long history of what we're calling digital transformation. When I first started out in my career, the big thing was data analytics, right? So data warehousing, data dashboards, which later became known as heads-up displays, executive dashboards. There were a bunch of different names for these. And soon after that, the Army, United States Army, actually embraced knowledge management, which I've always looked at as you're recording and institutionalizing an organization's knowledge to inform and better ramp up future staff members. So everybody gets smarter. Everybody gets to feed off of that organizational knowledge. And they came out with the platform, Army Knowledge Online, or AKO. And that was actually one of the largest API-based systems. More recently, we've seen a move from on-premise servers and applications to the cloud, where platforms like GovCloud provide secure web-based operations. And one of the newest shifts is embracing intelligent automation, looking for ways to make processes smarter and faster. And during this entire time, the government has consistently tried to borrow commercial best practices, realizing that there's some pretty smart ideas it could get from industry.
No, that's great. It's good to see that sort of across the board, everyone remaining competitive in this space. So along with that, have you seen evidence that people are letting maybe technology drive the transformation instead of strategy? So maybe people who have embraced a technology that is available and sounds exciting, but they don't really know what to do with it. I mean, I can think of, seeing RPA, for instance, out there, and maybe they've heard someone else getting benefit from it, but they're not sure how to use it, but it sounds really cool. Have you experienced any of that? Harry, why don't you start with this one?
Yeah, especially with some more of with some of the more nascent technologies, agencies have looked to industry for thought leadership. For example, through requests for information or RFIs. For example, recently, a decision in charge of their agency's records put out an RFI to explore how intelligent automation could be applied to their mission. They were trying to see how they could more efficiently and effectively classify new records, as well as respond to FOIA requests. That's Freedom of Information Act. They have a team of analysts that do this right now. And as you can imagine, it's pretty time consuming and it requires judgment. You just, you don't just want anything going out for public consumption. So the idea was proposed, we proposed the idea to leverage AI and ML to make decisions on classification and dissemination, respectively, and orchestrate those technologies through the Appian platform. So the idea is that over time, as more and more learning occurs, there'll be less and less need for that human interaction.
Yeah, and I want to jump in because I've definitely been surprised by some of my clients I've worked with for months or years, and then all of a sudden I find out they've had RPA the whole time. But in my time there, I haven't ever seen any evidence of strategic automation in their business. And so most of the time they say they're still experimenting with it. Oh, it's in a POC stage. Or maybe it's, one guy, IT guy's pet project. He's been building himself bots, but they aren't used strategically. More often than not, I see the companies buy a technology like RPA or AI and then try to fit it into solutions. But that's backwards. The companies who use it successfully and strategically held discovery sessions to solve specific problems. For example, how to get up-to-date regulatory information from a slurry of county websites, and then use that to help employees be proactive about compliance. And so they let the technology decisions come out of those meetings. In the regulatory example, since there were no APIs, no standard methods to get the information from all those different websites, the solution was to use RPA to scrape those websites, put information into the centralized platform, and then send notifications and reminders proactively to employees. Now that is valuable and strategic automation using RPA. And by the way, in order to hold a discovery session like that, you also need to know what strategic problem you're solving. Otherwise, you could get into that endless loop of brainstorming ideas and solutions that don't necessarily bring your company real value.
That's a really great point. A lot of these really, especially when you're looking at the technology and you're just curious and excited about the technology and look how to implement it, but not the other way, they just really aren't tied to strategic goals. And that was actually one of the drivers, and good segue, by the way, for building this maturity scale that we have here, to help get a sense for the maturity of the digital transformation efforts that we've seen out in the field. This sort of starts with the islands of innovation here on the lower left-hand side, where an individual department or group sees an opportunity to improve their work with technology. So can you give some examples of that? Harry, how about you?
Yeah, I'd point to the record-keeping example that I used earlier. They had a clear mission. They thought that AI and ML would be a good fit, and they were looking for an effective solution. And so they asked industry for thoughts through an RFI.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of organizations, just to jump in, I've seen a lot of organizations get a lot of value out of RPA here. Just think, giving a person a digital assistant, they get way more efficient at their existing job. You get a doc out of an email, you enter some of that data into a different system, huge part of a lot of corporate workflows. you have a bot do that, it increases the speed and the accuracy of that task. Simple automation, really nice results, definitely limited in scope. Some of your lower end no code, low code tools also allow you to get a lot of value out of here pretty quickly. You might have a couple people collaborating with a shared spreadsheet. Throwing that in a simple centralized system immediately fixes versioning and visibility issues that they have. It is worth pointing out that if you take this islands approach without understanding that there's a maturity curve after the islands approach, you can create some pretty long-term and substantial governance problems. So if you're planning on connecting your islands at any point, you need to know that that's out there and that's the future. You need to plan for it. Otherwise, you're going to have very significant challenges untangling all of the individual pockets of innovation that are coming up from the grassroots.
Yeah, that's great. That can really cause problems going from like this islands of innovation to connected islands here. So connected islands is what you were just talking about, where multiple departments start working together. So do you have any examples of that? Maybe let's start with Lakshmi.
Sure. I think this is where traditional BPM starts to become even more valuable. You start to get a lot of value out of reducing handoffs, coordinating tasks, centralizing reporting. You really get to break down the walls between silos. Once everyone's working off one set of data, updates to that data are made once and seen everywhere. Communication flows through that single workflow, regardless of what department you're in. And a lot of the time, the step from a single island to connected islands comes from an enthusiastic mid-level manager. An example from my experience, this manager implemented his own island of innovation by digitizing a major maintenance and inspection process for his oil and gas refinery for his location. Then he showed that to his colleagues at the other refinery locations, and they wanted the efficiency gains and centralized data too. And so they started connecting. They were using the same data, they're merging similar workflows into a single digital solution, and they added their own location-specific needs as well. And pretty soon, every refinery was connected. They were using standardized workflows, and those workflows had benefited from many managers using their wealth of experiences together to optimize, the best single process for them all to follow. They centralized their shared data, they were maintaining specific needs, and then they were able to generate real-time reports to send to corporate too.
Look, Sean, I'm going to jump in here. I know to this point I've been talking about a lot of government sector stuff. I'm actually going to switch to a commercial solution that we were involved with for a global real estate rental company. They're originally looking to get a handle on their inventory and used our solution to power their external facing sales website. And another group in the organization that handled the rental side of the house was looking for a solution to help with rental leads. Something that would basically help to enable their agents to take the leads and help prioritize them and track them to closure. So we helped the organization realize that the inventory system could help power the internal rental system by giving agents real-time access to availability information. And that helped them to find the perfect property for renters. Of course, it helped that both systems were made using the Appian platform, and that allowed for seamless interaction between the systems.
Cool. Well, the next is a pretty gosh darn big step here, synchronized operational. This is not only where you've got multiple departments sort of working together, but they're also usually sharing a budget, right? So there's responsibility across multiple teams to make this successful, and pain if it isn't. It's still very much a bottom-up kind of effort. Can you talk about some clients that you've seen in the synchronized operational kind of states, and have any stumbled getting to this step or making this step? Andy, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot stumble. You're not going to scope an IT project unless there's some impact. And doing something impactful that crosses departments while sharing a budget between those departments, you quickly start to see ownership issues and prioritization issues. If at all possible, you want to move through this step very, very, very quickly, or have the foresight to skip it. If you're spanning departments, you really, really want to have some sort of sponsorship, or you're going to need really, really strong change management paired with flawless execution. One of the departments is typically going to foot the majority of the bill, And if they're getting the majority of the value, they might be okay with that. But you're still going to run into those kind of prioritization issues.
Yeah, and I agree with Andy there. If you can skip it and go straight to the strategic step, you could reduce a fair amount of headache. But I have seen it work, right? That refinery, they actually stopped at synchronized operational because corporate just wouldn't get on board. And, it was all politics there. But the logical next step would have been for corporate to get involved. They would have gotten real-time aggregated data from all their refineries. It could have been really great. But what worked for them to make synchronized operational work and be really valuable was to have strong governance structures in place. They had a centralized Appian team who was impartial and helped all locations move forward by taking in new ideas for apps, determining return on investment, prioritizing, and ultimately building them out. And that governance structure is what ensured that the individual locations didn't just go rogue and start building things that didn't fit into the big picture solution. And they also monitored the code base to ensure that it was still scalable, easily modifiable, as regulations or procedures changed. And that governance team was really crucial to their continued success. And it should have been corporate's easy in to take such a successful program and use it to achieve strategic company goals, which I think is a nice segue into talking about that next step, strategic.
Yeah, it is. Thank you for the nice lead in there. So the next is strategic, of course, where your C-suite is involved and pushing the change down, into the company here we got. But have we seen any sort of change management issues when we get to this point, if it perhaps isn't completely crystal clear with the rest of the organization what that strategic vision is? I mean, I feel like, there's still a potential for a misstep here. But what have you seen in the field? Harry, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think the best example I've seen of it working well comes from that global real estate rental company that I mentioned earlier. The company CEO made sure that their entire leadership suite, I'm talking everybody from CXOs down to VPs, directors, attended our week-long Sprint Zero session. I've never quite seen anything like that. And actually, I've never seen anything like that again, unfortunately. But the end result was a leadership team that not only pitched into the vision for our solution, but also set the stage for a shared vision and gave them the firepower that everybody needed to promote those changes that the vision would entail to the remainder of the company.
Funny enough, I have an example. It's also a real estate company, just by chance, but this company worked more in the commercial property realm. In their case, I've actually got some good and not so good outcomes to talk about. So the board and the C-suite level decided to put a full strategic digital transformation into place. They even spun up a task force of diverse, qualified people to lead the effort. The task force was tasked with digitally transforming the company by the end of the year. And that was a great step forward. But there was one thing lacking right from the get-go. Why? Why are we digitally transforming anything? What is the real goal here? So the task force pushed on. They did a lot of analysis, road mapping, planning, to ensure they built a centralized, unified system. And in a lot of ways, they succeeded. Right at the end of the year, we did have a central platform for every employee in the company to start their work at each morning. The problem was, without that clear why, the apps available on the platform had varying levels of value to the employees. Workers could definitely start their morning there, but they'd quickly have to move elsewhere to get their real work done. They didn't really understand why they were being told to start there in the first place. No one had filled them in on any strategic vision for the platform. Managers, they would also start in the platform, and they did see some helpful aggregations that they didn't have before, but they couldn't really take enough action on that data because the team had spent too long making it look good and be really user-friendly. And so they had kind of missed the mark on value. And so if the goal really was every person logs into this every morning, then sure, they made it look really good. They had the latest company headlines, and that would be a win if that really is the goal. But it's not a digital transformation. If what they meant was every person is able to do their work from this platform daily, and it helps them work better, smarter, or faster, then that's a strategic digital transformation goal, but this team missed the mark, and the big part of that, the root cause is really that their goals and visions were not well articulated or clear to the rest of that organization.
Wow, ouch. That's painful. But I mean, it's great that you got the strategic influence, the C-suite buy-in, but the communication breakdown sounds really painful here. Well, we're on to the biggest, most pinnacle, give it a little crown here. The digital disruptors, right? They're sort of the big goal that people go for. So not only are they defining their markets, but they're maybe creating entirely new markets out there. I think, Andy talked about Amazon and Uber and some of the things that have been out there. These are sort of, I guess, unicorns in a way, right? But you've got the C-suite pushing ideas down, and you've got ideas welcome from below, and there's this great coordination and synchronicity between them. Have we had opportunity to work to help someone get to this level?
Yeah, I'll take this one.
Great.
Let's go back to the real estate company. It's funny that you should mention Amazon. The inventory system that we made for the real estate company worked out so well for them that we helped them see how they could change their business model entirely. See, up until that point, they derive a lot of their revenue from what they called owned real estate. So they take their own leases for places, and they then sublease for a small profit. And after we showed them how we could use Appian to connect to other systems, they then set out to become the eBay of rental companies. So not exactly Amazon, but close. Agreeing with similar companies, basically their competitors, to advertise their rental properties for them while collecting a small fee on each rental. So this dramatically expanded the scope of properties on the sales website and turned the business model on its head, basically.
That's remarkable. That's cool. But why do you think it's so hard, to make it here? What do you guys think? I mean, Andy, what do you think? How do things go sideways trying to get to digital disruptor?
Yeah, so everything that we've talked about so far is really about execution. You're taking discrete steps to take a existing business, make it more efficient or broader reaching. And I'm not saying this to downplay the impact or the complexity of strategic digital transformation. It's a huge accomplishment, but you're taking digital techniques and you're using them to make your existing organization better, maybe across the board. It's one thing to look at an organization and say, this is what we can do better. We need to tear down these silos. Here are places where we can work smarter and more collaboratively. These are some things that don't make sense to do anymore in 2020. And then to leverage some digital techniques to do that across the enterprise. That's hard. And it's impressive when you do it well. When you're talking about disruption, you're talking about taking digital techniques and using them to make your industry better. It's a whole different beast when you're looking at an industry and saying, this industry can do so much more for its customers. We're going to be the trailblazers. You almost have to have the best strategic transformation of anyone in your industry and then go even further. So it's rare because you need to execute, but you also have to have vision to push it even further. You have to be the person creating or the group creating that new thing under the sun.
Yeah, and digital transformation project failures, I find, look a lot like general IT project failures. There are a lot of potential points of failure that we could discuss, but the two biggest that I've seen have to do with people. First thing is you need to have an empowered and effective product owner. Many times I've seen people in agencies that are kind of tagged with the PO role and they've got little incentive or training to do the role the right way. And in other cases, I've actually seen committees tagged with the role and it's sort of quickly spinning merry-go-round of accountability. And in both cases, the lack of effective PO is a quick path to project failure. The team's agility and their alignment with changing client objectives and the velocity, they're all going to drop dramatically. I know at Mastodon, we advocate for effective POs. We work with our clients to get them set up as soon as possible. And Stacey, I know this is a topic that's near and dear to your heart. We offer training for budding POs. It's a quick plug for you, to make them and their organizations more effective, right? And so I mentioned two things. The second thing I've seen is the willingness to foster relationships between client stakeholders and the project team. Simply put, relationships, they help to get things done. And that's whether it's deciding on how to jointly address project challenges or brainstorming on ideas for future solutions. I've seen this being a lower priority with some agencies. Basically, they ask the question, why do I want to meet with the project team when we've hired them to get it done? The reality is that agency missions change. Information and collaboration throughout the project is going to build trust and ensure the developed solution, which could look very different from what was originally envisioned, will be effective towards the end of that project.
Yeah, and real quick, just to echo something that Andy, I think he said, didn't quite say, is just because disruptor is the furthest end of the spectrum doesn't mean that you failed if you didn't make it there. Strategic transformation is still a great goal and can provide huge value.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard the word governance here a lot in what we're talking about so far. What kind of structures do we need? Oh, I'm still doing the stamp here. Apologize. What kind of structures do we need sort of underlying all of this to make it successful so we don't run into these problems that you discussed? Andy, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I heart islands of innovation, just in case. The structures that you need are really rooted in constraints and the unique challenges that you're going to face when you try to do digital transformation, particularly change management and governance. So number one, recognize that this is a cultural change for a lot of folks. If you're at the top saying to yourself, we're going to turn this into a digital organization, you're going to have to look at some of the cultural things that helped you get to where you are that are going to turn into roadblocks. Part of this journey is that you are going to have to shuffle roles. Responsibilities will change. You might add departments, you might merge departments, et cetera. And that's going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of people. So you're going to have to think about how receptive people are to these types of initiatives. And for them, you're going to have to paint a clear picture of the benefits and reward them. The second piece is that you can't really skip steps. I said try to skip synchronized operational, but you got to go through the maturity process. You can't go from PDF forms and spreadsheets to turning an industry upside down. You've got to get people used to using digital internally. Then you have to get them used to working together through these digital forums. And then you've got to do that with purpose, strategically. So you can begin with the end in mind, and you can do this very, very quickly, but you have to start at the beginning. So in terms of the structure, you want to put things in place that prepare you to address the change management and cultural barriers, and then also something that will guide you through the maturity curve step by step. Could be a digital office, it could be a transformation center of excellence. It might just be a couple of change agents that are going to help you get things started, external consultants. You need executive buy-in, you need an advocate that has that business perspective to get people excited and help drive the cultural change. And then you need someone or some group that can drive and enforce the technical strategy, so you don't get stuck in the I heart islands of innovation.
Oh, but you're so happy in that little island. I mean, hey.
I love my island.
Yeah, that's great. So what does success look like to the clients that you've worked with that have been going through their digital transformation journey, no matter what sort of stage they're in? Can you talk about some of the return on investment that your clients have seen, no matter where they are in this overall journey? Lakshmi, why don't you start?
Yeah. So, like you're saying, the clients who did it right, no matter what stage of their digital transformation journey they were in, got some pretty clear ROI. And that return could be dollars saved, it could be time saved, data errors reduced. I mean, there's lots of different forms they can take on. So a few specific examples, that oil and gas refinery, they would never quite tell me how much money they were actually saving, but I know that for every hour a machinery unit is shut down for maintenance, there are dollars lost for refined oil not being produced. So some rough calculations show that they were saving easily $1 to $2 million every few months because their digital transformation reduced their maintenance downtimes by anywhere between 5 and 15%. And
Wow.
remember, they stopped at synchronized operational and got that. Another high ROI was for a manufacturing client. They digitized their entire production and warehouse floor, connecting everything from their barcode scanners to their touch screens on the walls, everything in a centralized platform. And it allowed them to scale from single shift work to multi-shift 24/7 production without adding any overhead work. They also automated a lot of their data entry by having the Appian platform sit on top of their other software, such as their ERP and CRM tools. And so that reduced swivel chair work and freed up people's time, But even more ROI, it actually drastically reduced the number of licenses they needed on those tools, which saved tens of thousands of dollars of yearly cost. And the last story that I'll tell is from a large life sciences organization. After years of reaping the benefits of digital transformation, they're kind of still an island of innovation in their R&D group. And while I would love to see them progress, I can't fault them for continuing to focus on their goals and automating more applications. After automating over 10 applications, they realize a roughly $1 million yearly ROI, a lot of which is from the time savings, reduced time for submission and approval, less time spent in meetings, voting on decisions, mainly creating documents and so on.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, just to jump in, we've worked with several that have really put together a good strategy around what they're trying to do around their transformation. The most successful, or some of the most successful, have started by just looking at ways to make it easier for their customers to do business with them. If you've heard the term frictionless, that's what that's all about. But just things like simplifying their pricing, speeding up quoting, introducing new incentives for their customers, and then allowing their customers to model them out online and claim them. These things increased the amount of customers that were coming to them. It increased the volume that they were doing, and that drove more revenue. Then on the delivery or operations side, they paired those same initiatives with simplified and streamlined, some cases automated internal processes. So they could take on that increased volume scalably. To Lakshmi's point, right? They're seeing both top line growth and increased market share, but more importantly, they're also seeing bottom line growth due to the efficiency gains.
That's terrific. Okay, so that was my last question. Let me see what we have from the audience here. Okay, well, this first one looks to be for Harry. And actually, this is a terrific question I have myself. Leadership seems to be core to getting to these higher levels of success with the strategic, it totally makes sense. How does that work in the federal world when there might be sort of a turnover every 4 years? I mean, we've got one coming up, but I think this is a terrific question. Yeah,
and that is extremely important. It's no secret that the government's hierarchical. So what I found is that once the top of an agency is engaged and convinced of the benefits of digital transformation and can set a clear vision, which would include objectives and guidance, the rest of the agency follows. Sometimes intermediate levels of leadership, especially those that are given wider latitude, will be able to set standards themselves, but the concept's pretty much the same. Obviously, as you have that churn, it's important for that vision to be set and then to be re-championed. Yeah, wow. Very relevant, timely. Okay, this next one looks to be from Sally. So what if, I think this one may have come in midway through our discussion, but it's good to reiterate, what if we don't make it the disruptor? Is it still worthwhile to go down this digital transformation path?
Absolutely. I pointed out some examples already, but just to reiterate, you can and will get, ROI and value at every stage of this process, right? From islands, all the way up to strategic and disruptor. And so I will say it's most helpful if you know what stage you want to get to. It's possible to move between the first, 2 to 3 stages without having strategic buy-in. But if you want to get there, then get your strategic buy-in early, right? And like Andy said, you can move through quickly at that point. So it's definitely good to have a vision, but absolutely, take as long as you need in every step and just focus on getting value and ROI while you're there.
That's great. Okay, so the next one is from James. It sounds like success is really tied to people. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think we all agree with that. How can we make sure the right people are involved, and what roles will we need to fill for this to be successful? Harry, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll take it. James, I think you hit the nail right on the head. You need to get the right people involved. These transformations that we're talking about are going to result in enterprise-wide changes. So you can expect to bring in a wide array of people. So who are the right people to bring in? Well, first, you got to have the stakeholder. You need to have the stakeholders that can provide the vision for the transformation. That needs to be measurably defined at the project, the business unit, and at the corporate levels. A lot of times, transformation efforts will take into account just one or two of those angles. So the project and corporate levels, but not the business unit level, let's say. And as a result, there's a key piece missing from the value proposition. So you need all three are represented. One other helpful hint here, your project may actually span both the business and IT functions. It happens a lot of times. And so you need to make sure that you bring representatives from both of those units. You also need to bring in the sponsor. That's the person that's paying for the project, as well as the governance team. For example, the designated product owner, the project manager, and maybe even members of the client's PMO. So we advocate getting all these people together during the initiative Sprint Zero, or if you're coordinating, let's say through SAFE, through program increment planning sessions.
That's great. Okay, so I think I'm on to my last question. If you have anything else, guys, in the audience, please do put it up here. But this one, really great one from Douglas. How do I get started? How do you get started? Andy, why don't you start with that one?
It's 2020. Thankfully, not for much longer, but the point is that you have pockets of innovation already. You already got started, whether or not you have a strategy around it. So you got islands of innovation. Go find them. Figure out what they are. Figure out what people are already doing in your organization, and then connect the islands. Right? Figure out how your groups can work together a little bit better.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you for attending, everyone. Please do follow us on your favorite social media platform. We're going to get this recording cleaned up, put it out there, and send it out to everyone who attended. And please stay tuned for our next webinar, likely to happen in early February. We'll send out an email about that too. So thank you to my panelists, Andy, Harry, Lakshmi. It's been a pleasure, as always, to talk. And happy holidays for everyone. And thank you for attending.